It was a sweltering Saturday afternoon in the heart of Washington, D.C., where the National Intelligence Center, NIC, stood like a silent sentinel in a city known for its whispers. Inside, classified documents and high-level conversations took place daily. But today, things were about to get a lot more personal. Sam Hawk Carter, a former Special Forces operative, was now working as a civilian security consultant for the NIC. Few knew the full scope of his background, and even fewer knew the kind of man he truly was beneath the fatigues. Hawk had spent years in covert operations, in places most people couldn't even find on a map. But none of that mattered anymore. He was just another part of the fabric that made Washington run. Or at least, that's what he tried to tell himself. It all started when a rough and tumble biker gang, the Iron Wolves, rolled into town for a weekend ride. These weren't your typical weekend warriors. They were a group of ex-soldiers, mercenaries, and outlaws who thought they could live by their own rules. But they had no idea they were about to mess with the wrong guy. The gang was known for their ruthless reputation. They didn't follow the laws of the road, nor did they care for local ordinances. And now, they'd set their sights on one of the most secure places in Washington, the NIC. They had a score to settle with someone inside, something about a weapons deal gone wrong in the past. But they didn't know who they were dealing with. Hawk was walking out of the NIC after a long shift when the rumble of Harley engines broke the quiet hum of the city streets. As he reached the corner of the block, the gang pulled up, blocking the sidewalk with their bikes. These men were used to dominating spaces, and Hawk was in their way. "Hey, soldier boy. Move your ass," one of the bikers growled, a scarred man with a black leather vest adorned with patches. His name was Jax, and he was known to be the gang's enforcer. Hawk didn't budge. He just stood there, sizing them up. "I don't think you heard me," Jax sneered, stepping closer, his eyes narrowing. "I said, move." Hawk's gaze never wavered. He'd been in worse situations than this, he'd been to hell and back. But something about this moment felt different. Maybe it was the arrogant disrespect, or maybe it was the fact that these bikers had no idea who they were really messing with. "You really don't want to do this," Hawk said, his voice calm but cold, like a winter wind sweeping through the streets. "I don't care what you're here for, but you're barking up the wrong tree." Jack scoffed. "You think we're scared of some washed-up soldier?" He motioned to his gang. "Let's show this guy what happens when he talks back to us." Hawk didn't move. He just waited, like a lion assessing its prey. The other bikers started to rev their engines, clearly hoping to intimidate him. But Hawk was far from intimidated. What the bikers didn't know was that Hawk wasn't just any former soldier. He had an extensive background in hand-to-hand combat, marksmanship, and psychological warfare. But his true strength came from the deep, unshakable confidence that only a man who had been to the darkest places in the world could have. He didn't need to prove anything. Jax took another step toward him, pulling a knife from his belt. But before he could make his move, Hawk grabbed his wrist with the speed of a striking cobra. In one swift motion, he twisted it, disarming Jax and sending the blade flying through the air. The biker tried to pull away, but Hawk locked him in a hold, pinning him to the ground with almost no effort. The other bikers immediately went for their weapons, but before they could pull a gun or swing a fist, a voice echoed down the street. "Enough!" Out of the shadows emerged a figure in a sharp suit, a man whose presence seemed to freeze the air around him. It was Agent Mason, a top intelligence operative at the NIC who had been watching the whole scene unfold. He was an old friend of Hawk's from his active days, and the two shared a quiet understanding that the world never saw. "Jax, I suggest you and your crew get back on your bikes and leave before things get even more complicated," Agent Mason said. Coolly, Jax glared at him. "You think we're scared of you, Mason?" "I think you're out of your depth," Mason replied, his eyes never leaving the gang leader. Hawk here isn't someone you want to tangle with. And the NIC is a whole lot more than just a building. You'll be making an enemy of the entire intelligence community if you push this. Jax hesitated for a moment, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he grunted, signaling to his gang to fall back. They climbed back on their bikes, revved their engines one last time, and peeled out of the street. But before Jax disappeared into the distance, he shot one last glance at Hawk. "This ain't over," muttered under his breath. Hawk just nodded. "It never is." As the bikers faded into the background, Agent Mason turned to Hawk. "You always know how to handle these situations." Hawk shrugged. "Sometimes you gotta show people why you don't mess with a soldier. They think they can walk into anything and push their weight around. But some of us don't just fade into the background." "You sure you don't want to come back to the old world, Hawk?" Mason asked, as if the offer was a regular one. Hawk paused, looking at the darkening sky above the city. "Nah, I've done my time. Just trying to stay out of trouble." Mason chuckled. "You? Out of trouble? That's a first." But Hawk didn't respond. He just watched the city unfold before him, the same city where secrets were kept and power played in shadows. It was a game he knew well, and today, for once, he was on the winning side. As the sun set over Washington, D.C., Hawk knew that the next time someone crossed him, they wouldn't be as lucky. After all, some soldiers, no matter how far they've gone, never forget how to fight.